Captain Jake Martinez stood in front of the mirror in his small cabin. He fixed his blue uniform one more time and checked his hair. Today was the most important day of his life. He was about to meet the Empress of the Zephyrian Empire for the first time. Jake was 32 years old and had been flying spaceships for 10 years. He was not the strongest or the smartest captain in the human fleet, but he was good at talking to people. That was why Earth Command chose him to lead this mission. He had to make friends with the aliens and start trade talks. The ship New Horizon had been traveling for 6 months to reach this place. Jake's crew was excited but nervous. They were the first humans to meet the Zephyrians in person. Everything had to go perfectly. "Captain, we are ready," said Admiral Lisa Parker over the radio. She was Jake's second officer and his best friend. Lisa was smart and always helped Jake when things got hard. Jake walked to the main deck where his team was waiting. Dr. Ben Thompson was reading his notes about Zephyrian culture. He was the expert who was supposed to help Jake not make mistakes. Kate Sullivan was checking the communication equipment. She was young but very good with computers and languages. "Remember, Captain," said Dr. Thompson, "the Zephyrians care a lot about respect and tradition. Follow the greeting I showed you exactly. Give the gift with your right hand and bow your head slightly." Jake nodded. He had practiced the greeting many times. In his pocket, he had a small white daisy from the ship's garden. Dr. Thompson said flowers were good gifts because they showed life and beauty. The android Alex Carter walked up to them. Alex looked like a human, but was actually a robot that could translate languages. "Translation systems are working perfectly, Captain," Alex said in his calm voice. "I will help you understand everything they say." Through the big window, Jake could see the Zephyrian ship. It was huge and looked like a silver mountain floating in space. Strange blue lights moved across its surface like living things. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful and scary at the same time. "They are asking us to come aboard," said Kate from her station. "They are sending a small ship to pick us up." Jake's heart beat faster. This was it. He looked at his team. "Remember, we are not just representing ourselves. We speak for all humans today. Let's make Earth proud." The Zephyrian shuttle was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, with soft lights moving under the surface. The pilot was a Zephyrian but wore a helmet, so Jake could not see what he looked like. When they arrived at the big ship, Jake was amazed. The walls were covered in beautiful patterns that seemed to tell stories. The air smelled like flowers and something else he could not identify. Everything was bigger than human size, which made Jake feel very small. 2 Zephyrian guards met them at the door. They were tall, maybe 8 feet, with green and gold scales that shined in the light. Their eyes were large and golden, and they moved with perfect grace. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. They looked like dragons from old Earth stories, but they walked on 2 legs and wore elegant clothes. "Welcome, humans," one guard said in perfect English. "The Empress waits for you in the Great Hall." As they walked through the ship, Jake saw more Zephyrians. They all stopped what they were doing to look at the humans. Some seemed curious, others looked worried. Jake tried to smile and look friendly. The Great Hall was enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake could barely see it. Hundreds of Zephyrians stood along the walls, all dressed in beautiful robes of different colors. At the far end of the room, on a platform, sat the most impressive being Jake had ever seen. Empress Valexia was larger than the other Zephyrians. Her scales were deep purple and silver, and they caught the light like jewels. She wore a crown that looked like it was made of starlight. Her golden eyes were sharp and intelligent, and when she looked at Jake, he felt like she could see into his soul. "Approach," the Empress said. Her voice was deep and musical. Jake walked forward with his team behind him. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching his every move. His hands were sweating, but he tried to stay calm. When he reached the platform, Jake remembered Dr. Thompson's instructions. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the white daisy. It looked so small and simple in this grand place. He held it out with his right hand and made the gesture Dr. Thompson had taught him, a complex movement with his fingers while bowing his head. The moment Jake finished the gesture, the entire hall became silent. Not one Zephyrian moved or made a sound. Jake looked up and saw that the Empress was staring at him with wide eyes. Even her guards looked shocked. Jake felt something was wrong, but he did not know what. He looked back at Dr. Thompson, who looked confused and worried. The Empress stood up slowly. She was even more impressive standing than sitting. She looked down at Jake for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that carried across the entire hall. I accept your proposal, human male, she said clearly. Our bonding ceremony shall commence in 7 solar cycles. The hall exploded with noise. Zephyrians were talking excitedly, some cheering, others looking shocked. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. He turned to look at his team, who all looked as confused and scared as he felt. What did I do? Jake whispered to Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson was looking through his notes frantically. I don't know, he said. This wasn't supposed to happen. Admiral Parker stepped closer to Jake. Captain, I think we have a problem, she said quietly. The Empress was still looking at Jake with those golden eyes. For the first time since entering the hall, she smiled. It was not a mean smile, but it made Jake even more nervous. You may return to your ship to prepare, the Empress said. We will send someone to help you understand your new duties as my intended mate. Jake wanted to say something to explain that there had been a mistake, but no words came out. He just stood there holding a daisy, while an alien Empress talked about marrying him. This was definitely not how he had planned to make first contact with an alien race. Jake sat in the meeting room aboard the New Horizon with his head in his hands. The last 2 hours felt like a bad dream, but he knew it was all real. Around the table, his crew looked just as worried as he felt. Okay, let's think about this step by step, said Admiral Lisa Parker. She was trying to stay calm, but Jake could hear the stress in her voice. What exactly happened back there? Dr. Ben Thompson was still looking through his research files on his computer. His hands were shaking slightly as he typed. I'm checking everything again. The greeting gesture I taught you was supposed to be a simple, respectful bow. Nothing more. Kate Sullivan was working at her communication station. I'm trying to contact Earth Command, but we're too far away. Any message will take at least 3 weeks to reach home, and another 3 weeks to get a reply back. Jake looked up at his team. These people had trusted him to lead them safely, and now they were all in danger because of his mistake. How bad is this, really? Chief Engineer Ryan Brooks, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. Captain, I've been reading about Zephyrian culture in our database. Marriage to their Empress is not just personal. It's political. It affects their entire empire. That's what I'm afraid of, said Dr. Thompson. He turned his computer screen so everyone could see. Look at this. I found something in the old files. The gesture you made wasn't just a greeting. It was an ancient proposal ritual that hasn't been used in hundreds of years. How was I supposed to know that? Jake asked, feeling frustrated and scared. You weren't, Dr. Thompson said sadly. The information in our cultural database was incomplete. We didn't know about the old traditions because the Zephyrians never told us about them. Before anyone could say more, Kate's communication system started beeping. Captain, we're getting a message from the Zephyrian ship. Someone wants to come aboard. Who? Asked Admiral Parker. Kate listened to her earpiece. It's someone called Cathara. She says she's the Empress's personal aide and she's coming to help with bonding preparations. Jake felt his stomach drop. Tell them we need a few minutes to prepare. Too late, Captain, said Ryan from his station. Their shuttle is already on its way to our landing bay. Admiral Parker stood up and straightened her uniform. All right, everyone stay calm. We need to be polite, but try to understand what's really happening here. Maybe we can find a way to fix this. 5 minutes later, they were all standing in the landing bay watching a small Zephyrian shuttle land. When the door opened, a Zephyrian female stepped out. She was smaller than the others they had seen, maybe only 7 feet tall, with bright green scales and kind eyes. Greetings, she said in good English. I am Cathara, personal aide to Empress Phylexia. I come to help prepare Captain Martinez for the bonding ceremony. Jake stepped forward, trying to look more confident than he felt. Thank you for coming. But I think there might be some misunderstanding. I didn't mean to propose to your Empress, Cathara looked confused. But you performed the ritual of heart's offering. You gave her the sacred flower and made the ancient gesture. The entire court witnessed it. It was an accident, Jake said desperately. We didn't know what those things meant. Cathara's expression changed from confusion to worry. Oh dear, this is very serious. In our culture, once the Empress accepts a proposal, it cannot be taken back. To break such a promise would be considered an act of war. The humans all looked at each other with growing panic. Admiral Parker stepped forward. Surely there must be some way to explain the misunderstanding. The news has already been broadcast across our empire, Cathara said. Millions of Zephyrians know that their Empress has chosen a mate. To reject him now would bring great shame to her and anger to our people. Dr. Thompson cleared his throat. Is there any traditional way for a proposal to be honorably withdrawn? Kethera thought for a moment. There is one possibility. If the proposed mate proves to be unworthy through trial, the Empress can reject him without losing honor. But these trials are very difficult and dangerous. What kind of trials? Jake asked, not sure he wanted to know the answer. 3 tests, Kethera explained. First, combat skill. Second, wisdom and strategy. Third, understanding of the heart. Many have tried these trials over the centuries. Very few have succeeded, Ryan Brooks whispered to Kate. At least it's better than a war. Before anyone could ask more questions, Kate's communication system beeped again. Captain, we have another message from the Zephyrian ship. The Empress herself wants to come aboard for dinner tonight. Jake felt like he might faint. The Empress wants to come here? To our ship? Kethera smiled for the first time since arriving. Yes, she wishes to know her intended mate better. This is actually very unusual. Normally, the Empress does not visit other ships. You have impressed her. I've impressed her by accidentally proposing to her, Jake said weakly. Yes, Kethera said seriously. No one has dared to approach her romantically in over 50 years. Our people thought she would never choose a mate. Your boldness has surprised everyone. Admiral Parker looked at Jake. Captain, what do you want to do? Jake thought about their options. They couldn't run away. The Zephyrian fleet surrounded them. They couldn't fight. The aliens were much more advanced. The only choice was to play along and hope they could find a way out of this mess. We'll have dinner with the Empress, Jake decided. Maybe we can explain everything then. Kethera clapped her hands together. Wonderful. I will help you prepare. There are many customs you must learn for dining with royalty. As Kethera began explaining proper dinner etiquette, Jake caught Admiral Parker's eye. She gave him a small nod that said she would support whatever he decided to do. Kate finished setting up the communication equipment and joined the group. Captain, I managed to send a message to Earth Command explaining the situation. But like I said, it will be weeks before we hear back. By then, this will all be over one way or another, Jake said. Dr. Thompson closed his computer and looked at Jake seriously. Captain, I want you to know that this wasn't your fault. Our information was wrong. You were just trying to be respectful. Thanks, Ben, Jake said. But right now, let's focus on getting through dinner without making things worse. As they prepared for the strangest dinner party in human history, Jake wondered how his simple mission to make friends with aliens had turned into an accidental engagement to their Empress. He had wanted to make history, but not like this. Outside the ship's windows, the massive Zephyrian fleet waited silently in space. Jake knew that his next few hours might determine not just his own fate, but the future relationship between humans and one of the most powerful alien races in the galaxy. No pressure at all. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling like he had barely slept. The dinner with Empress Phylexia had been strange and confusing. She was not what he had expected. Instead of being angry about the misunderstanding, she seemed curious about him and asked many questions about human culture. Now he stood in the ship's main meeting room, facing Kethera and 2 large Zephyrian guards. The Empress had sent them with news about the trials. The Empress has decided, Kethera announced. Captain Martinez will face the 3 traditional trials to prove his worthiness. The first trial begins in 1 hour. Admiral Parker stepped closer to Jake. What exactly does the first trial involve? One of the guards, who was even bigger than the others Jake had seen, spoke in a deep voice. Combat trial. The proposed mate must face Champion Grixtar in single combat. Jake felt his mouth go dry. Single combat? You mean fighting? Yes, the guard said. If you defeat our champion, you pass the first trial. If you lose... He didn't finish the sentence, but Jake could guess what happened. Dr. Thompson looked worried. Captain, you're not a soldier. You're a scientist and diplomat. I know, Jake said, trying to sound braver than he felt. But I don't think we have a choice. Kethera looked sympathetic. The trial will take place in our ship's combat arena. Your crew may watch. The Empress will be there as well. An hour later, Jake found himself standing in the largest room he had ever seen. The Zephyrian combat arena was like a small stadium, with hundreds of seats rising up around a circular fighting area. Every seat was filled with Zephyrians who had come to watch the strange human fight their champion. Jake wore simple fighting clothes and felt very small. Across the arena, Champion Grixtar was warming up. He was the largest Zephyrian Jake had seen yet, with dark red scales and muscles that looked like they could crush a car. He carried a weapon that looked like a cross between a sword and a club. "Don't try to match his strength," Admiral Parker whispered to Jake. "You're faster and smaller. Use that." "Easier said than done," Jake replied, watching Grixtar swing his weapon around like it weighed nothing. The Empress sat on a high platform overlooking the arena. She was wearing different clothes than the day before, simpler but still elegant. When she looked at Jake, her expression was unreadable. A Zephyrian official stepped into the center of the arena. "The first trial begins now. Combat will continue until one fighter yields or cannot continue." Jake walked to his starting position, his heart beating so fast he thought everyone could hear it. Grixtar stomped to his own position and roared, showing teeth that were definitely designed for tearing things apart. The official raised his hand and dropped it. "Begin." Grixtar charged immediately, moving faster than Jake thought possible for someone so big. Jake barely rolled out of the way as the champion's weapon smashed into the floor where he had been standing. For the next few minutes, Jake spent most of his time running and dodging. Grixtar was strong and fast, but he seemed to expect Jake to stand and fight like a traditional warrior. Instead, Jake used every dirty trick he could remember from old movies and basic training. When Grixtar swung his weapon in a wide arc, Jake ducked under it and kicked sand from the arena floor into the champion's eyes. While Grixtar was blinking and roaring, Jake grabbed a piece of broken stone from an earlier weapon strike and threw it hard at the champion's knee. The crowd gasped as Grixtar stumbled. No one had expected the small human to fight so strangely. Jake knew he couldn't win through strength, so he had to be smarter. He led Grixtar around the arena, making the big champion chase him until he started breathing hard. Then Jake used the arena walls to his advantage, jumping off them to change direction quickly. Finally, Jake saw his chance. Grixtar made a powerful overhead swing that buried his weapon deep in the arena floor. While the champion struggled to pull it free, Jake jumped on his back and wrapped his arms around the big alien's neck in a chokehold he had learned in basic training. Grixtar thrashed and spun, trying to throw Jake off, but Jake held on tight. Slowly, the champion's movements became weaker. Finally, Grixtar tapped Jake's arm, the universal signal for yielding. Jake let go and dropped to the ground, breathing hard. The arena was completely silent for a moment, then erupted in surprised cheers. The Empress stood up. "The first trial is complete. Captain Martinez has proven his combat worthiness through cleverness and determination." 3 days later, Jake faced the second trial. This time he sat in a command chair in front of a massive holographic display showing a space battle. The test was to command Zephyrian forces against a simulated enemy fleet. "This is the Battle of Kethros," explained the Zephyrian admiral running the test. "It happened 50 years ago. Our forces were defeated because we could find no solution to the enemy's strategy. Show us how you would win." Jake studied the display. The enemy fleet was using hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and then disappearing before the Zephyrian forces could respond. Traditional Zephyrian strategy focused on big, direct battles, but this enemy wouldn't give them one. Jake thought about human military history and remembered reading about similar problems. Instead of chasing the enemy fleet, he divided his forces into small, fast groups and set up a trap. He used some ships as bait to draw the enemy into an area where hidden ships could surround them. The strategy worked perfectly in the simulation. The enemy fleet was caught and defeated with fewer losses than any Zephyrian commander had ever managed. "Remarkable," said the admiral. "You think like no Zephyrian commander would. Your solution is unusual but effective." The Empress, who had been watching silently, smiled slightly. "Humans think differently than we do. That may be valuable." After the second trial, Jake found himself spending more time talking with the Empress. She visited his ship again, and this time she seemed more relaxed. She asked about Earth, about human families, and about what Jake liked to do when he wasn't working. "Do all humans question everything like you do?" she asked during one of their conversations. "Pretty much," Jake said. "We're taught to think for ourselves and find new solutions to old problems. That must be freeing," she said thoughtfully. "I have been taught to follow tradition and maintain order. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just try something new." Jake was starting to realize that the Empress was not just a ruler, but a person who had been alone and isolated for most of her life. No one treated her like a normal person. and she seemed to enjoy talking to someone who wasn't afraid to disagree with her sometimes. Meanwhile, his crew was getting to know the Zephyrians better too. Ryan Brooks was fascinated by their ship technology and spent hours talking with their engineers. Kate Sullivan was learning their language and making friends with some of the younger Zephyrians. "Captain," Dr. Thompson said one evening, "I think the Zephyrians are as curious about us as we are about them. This accidental proposal might actually be the best thing that could have happened for human-alien relations." Jake wasn't sure about that yet, but he had to admit that he was learning to like the Empress as a person. She was intelligent, funny when she relaxed, and surprisingly lonely despite being the most powerful person in her empire. Still, he had one more trial to face, and everyone said it was the hardest one. The trial of the heart would test whether Jake truly understood what it meant to care for the Zephyrian people and their way of life. As he prepared for the final trial, Jake wondered if he was still trying to find a way out of this situation, or if he was starting to consider what it might be like to stay. The third trial was different from the others. Instead of fighting or commanding battles, Jake found himself sitting in what looked like a courtroom. Hundreds of Zephyrians filled the seats, and the Empress sat on her throne watching everything carefully. "The trial of the heart," announced the chief judge, an elderly Zephyrian with silver scales. "Tests wisdom, compassion, and understanding. Captain Martinez must solve a legal case that has puzzled our courts for 6 months." Jake felt nervous but also curious. This was more like the kind of problem he was trained to handle as a diplomat. The judge continued. "Two clans, the Veltar and the Kesmin, both claim ownership of a valuable mining world. The Veltar discovered it first, but the Kesmin developed it and built cities there. Both clans have valid claims under our law. Traditional judgment would give it to the Veltar because they found it first, but the Kesmin have put their life's work into making it their home." Jake listened as representatives from both clans presented their cases. The Veltar were a family of explorers who had spent generations searching for new worlds. They had found the mining planet 50 years ago, but couldn't develop it immediately because they were busy with other projects. The Kesmin were builders and engineers. When they learned about the undeveloped world, they asked permission to build there temporarily. The Veltar agreed, thinking it would only be for a few years. But the Kesmin worked so hard that they turned the empty planet into a thriving world with millions of inhabitants. Now both clans wanted control. The Veltar said the world was theirs by right of discovery. The Kesmin said they had earned it through 50 years of hard work, and that millions of people now called it home. Jake thought about the problem for a long time. In human law, there might be clear answers, but this wasn't about human law. This was about understanding what was fair and right for the Zephyrian people. Finally, Jake stood up to give his judgment. The entire courtroom became silent. "Both clans are right," he began. "The Veltar did discover the world first, and that should mean something. But the Kesmin turned an empty rock into a home for millions of people, and that should mean something too." He paused and looked at both clan representatives. Instead of taking the world away from one clan to give to the other, why not share it? The Veltar could be given ownership of all future mining rights and a percentage of profits from what has already been built. The Kesmin could keep control of the cities and homes they built, plus the right to continue living there. The crowd murmured with interest. This was not the kind of solution anyone had expected. Jake continued. "Both clans could work together to explore and develop other worlds. The Veltar are good at finding new places, and the Kesmin are good at building. Together they could create something better than either could alone." The judge looked surprised. "This solution honors both tradition and progress. It punishes no one and rewards everyone for their contributions." The representatives from both clans talked quietly with their advisors. After several minutes, they both nodded agreement. The courtroom erupted in amazed chatter. The Empress stood up. "Captain Martinez has shown wisdom and compassion. He has passed the third trial." She paused and looked directly at him. "All 3 trials are now complete. You have proven yourself worthy in combat, strategy, and heart. The choice is now yours." Jake felt his stomach flutter. This was the moment he had been both dreading and anticipating. "Choice, Your Majesty. You may honorably withdraw your proposal and leave with your crew, with our friendship and respect," she said formally. "Or you may choose to stay and truly become my mate, joining our 2 peoples in alliance." The courtroom became completely silent. Everyone was waiting for his answer. Jake looked at his crew in the audience. Admiral Parker gave him an encouraging nod. Dr. Thompson looked worried but supportive. Kate and Ryan both smiled, letting him know they would accept whatever he decided. "Your Majesty," Jake said, "may I have some time to consider this choice?" "Of course," the Empress replied. "This decision will affect many lives. Take the time you need." That evening, Jake walked alone in the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the stars. Admiral Parker found him there an hour later. "How are you holding up, Captain?" she asked, sitting down beside him. "I don't know," Jake said honestly. "A week ago, I was just supposed to make friends with some aliens and set up trade agreements. Now I'm trying to decide whether to marry their Empress." "What does your heart tell you?" Parker asked. Jake was quiet for a moment. "That's the confusing part. I actually like her. Lisa. She's smart and funny and lonely. I think she's been waiting her whole life for someone to treat her like a normal person instead of just a title." "And how do you feel about staying here?" "About not going home?" Jake thought about Earth, about his small apartment and his routine job. Then he thought about the wonders he had seen in the past week, about the chance to explore new worlds and help two species learn from each other. "Maybe home isn't a place," he said slowly. "Maybe it's where you can do the most good." The next day, the Empress visited Jake's ship one more time. This time she came alone, without guards or advisors. She seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable. "I want you to know," she said, "that I hoped you would fail the trials at first." Jake looked surprised. "You did?" She nodded. "Being Empress is lonely. Everyone is either afraid of me or wants something from me. I thought marriage would just be another duty, another burden." She paused. "But watching you during the trial, seeing how you think and solve problems, I realized that perhaps marriage could be partnership instead of duty." "What would that mean?" Jake asked. "It would mean changing thousands of years of tradition," she said. "Instead of the Empress ruling alone with a silent mate, we would rule together. Your people and mine could learn from each other. It would not be easy." Jake studied her face. "And if I choose to leave?" "Then you leave with honor and I remain alone as I have always been," she said simply. "But I hope you will consider staying. Not because of duty or politics, but because you want to." That night, Jake called his crew together for one final meeting. "I've made my decision," he told them. "But first, I want you all to know that whatever happens, you're free to return to Earth if you want. I won't ask you to stay because of my choice." Dr. Thompson leaned forward. "What is your choice, Captain?" Jake took a deep breath. "I'm going to stay. I'm going to marry the Empress and help build a real alliance between our peoples." Admiral Parker smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. You're not upset?" Jake asked. "Captain," said Kate, "this is the most important thing that's ever happened in human history. You're not just getting married. You're building a bridge between the stars." Ryan nodded. "And if it's okay with you, sir, we'd like to stay and help." Jake felt a warmth spread through his chest. His crew, his friends, were willing to stay with him and help make this work. Tomorrow he would give the Empress his answer. But tonight, for the first time since this whole adventure began, Jake felt like he was making the right choice. Jake stood before the Empress in the great hall where this entire adventure had begun. This time he was not nervous or confused. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, "I accept your offer of marriage, but I have some conditions." The crowd of Zephyrians murmured with surprise. No one had ever dared to make conditions when accepting a proposal from their Empress. The Empress raised her hand for silence. "Speak your conditions, Jake Martinez." Jake had practiced this speech, but now the words came from his heart. "I don't want to be a silent mate who stands beside your throne and says nothing. I want to be your partner. I want our marriage to be the beginning of a real friendship between humans and Zephyrians." "Continue," the Empress said, her golden eyes bright with interest. "I want my crew to stay and help build this alliance. I want humans and Zephyrians to work together, to learn from each other, to explore space side by side." Jake paused. "And I want to call you Valexia, not just your Majesty, because that's your name." The Empress smiled, and this time it was a real smile, not the formal expression she usually wore in public. "I accept your conditions, Jake, all of them." The wedding ceremony 3 weeks later was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It took place on a beautiful planet that was neutral territory between human and Zephyrian space. Representatives from both species came to witness the historic event. Jake wore a combination of human formal wear and Zephyrian ceremonial robes. The colors were chosen to represent both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld. Valexia looked magnificent in traditional royal wedding attire that sparkled like captured starlight. Admiral Parker served as Jake's best woman, while Kethara stood beside Valexia as her honor attendant. Dr. Thompson had worked with Zephyrian priests to create a ceremony that honored both cultures. Today, announced the Zephyrian high priest, we witness not just the joining of two hearts, but the birth of a new alliance between worlds. The ceremony included both human traditions, like exchanging rings, and Zephyrian customs, like sharing a special drink that symbolized trust. When Jake and Valexia spoke their vows, they promised not just to love each other, but to work together for the good of both their peoples. I promise to learn from you, Jake said, and to help our peoples understand each other. I promise to share my world with you, Valexia replied, and to build something new together. When they were officially married, the celebration lasted for 3 days. Humans and Zephyrians ate together, shared stories, and began the friendships that would make their alliance strong. 6 months later, Jake found himself in a meeting room aboard the joint exploration ship Unity. Half the crew was human, half Zephyrian, and they worked together better than anyone had expected. The mining dispute on Kepler Station has been resolved, reported Captain Amy Chen, a human officer who now served in the joint fleet. Both human and Zephyrian mediators worked together to find a fair solution. Jake nodded and made notes on his tablet. As the first human Zephyrian prince, he had become a diplomatic liaison between the two species. It was challenging work, but he loved it. What about the exploration mission to the Andros system? Asked Commander Thekmar, a Zephyrian who had become one of Jake's closest advisors. The joint science team has made an amazing discovery, said Dr. Thompson, who now ran the combined research program. They found ruins of an ancient civilization that might be older than either human or Zephyrian recorded history. Valexia, who was reviewing reports at the other end of the table, looked up. This is exactly what we hoped for when we began this alliance. Humans and Zephyrians working together can accomplish things neither could do alone. After the meeting, Jake and Valexia walked together through the ship's observation deck. Through the large windows, they could see the joint fleet, human ships flying alongside Zephyrian vessels, exploring space together. Do you ever miss Earth? Valexia asked. Jake thought about it. Sometimes I miss the simple things like pizza and baseball games. But I don't regret my choice. This is where I belong now. Even though you never meant to propose to me in the first place? She asked with amusement. Jake laughed. Especially because of that. If I had planned this, I probably would have messed it up completely. They stopped at a window where they could see the newest addition to their fleet, a ship designed jointly by human and Zephyrian engineers. It was faster and more advanced than anything either species had built alone. Admiral Parker says her crew is ready for the deep space mission, Valexia said. The one to explore beyond the galactic edge? Jake asked. That's going to be dangerous. But exciting, Valexia replied. Our peoples are natural explorers. Together we can go further than either could alone. Jake nodded, watching as small ships moved between the larger vessels, carrying crew members and supplies. Some ships carried humans to Zephyrian vessels. Others brought Zephyrians to human ships. The cooperation that had seemed impossible a year ago was now completely normal. You know, Jake said, I've been thinking about something Dr. Thompson said. He thinks this alliance is going to change everything for both our species. How so? Valexia asked. Humans learn fast and adapt quickly, but we sometimes make decisions without thinking them through completely. Zephyrians are wise and consider all consequences, but sometimes you're too cautious to try new things. Jake smiled. Together we balance each other out. Valexia took his hand. Speaking of new things, I have some news. Jake looked at her curiously. What kind of news? The council has approved your proposal for the joint academy. We're going to build a school where young humans and Zephyrians can learn together. Jake felt excitement rush through him. Really? They agreed to it? Your idea to start with volunteer families was brilliant, Valexia said. 50 human families and 50 Zephyrian families have already signed up to participate in the pilot program. That evening, Jake stood in his quarters writing a message to Earth. He had sent regular reports home, but this one was special. Dear Earth Command, he wrote. 1 year ago, I made the biggest mistake of my diplomatic career. I accidentally proposed to the ruler of the most powerful alien empire we had ever encountered. Today, I can report that this mistake has become the foundation of the strongest alliance in human history. He paused, thinking about everything that had happened. Humans and Zephyrians now serve together on joint ships. Our children will grow up learning from each other. We're exploring parts of space that neither species could reach alone. Trade between our worlds has brought prosperity to both sides. Jake looked out his window at the stars and smiled. I know this report will seem unbelievable to many people back home. A year ago, I would not have believed it myself. But sometimes the best things happen when we're not planning them. Sometimes a mistake can become the beginning of something wonderful. He finished the report and sent it toward Earth, knowing it would take weeks to arrive. Then he went to find Valexia, who was probably still working on plans for their next joint mission. As he walked through the ship's corridors, Jake passed human and Zephyrian crew members working together, laughing together, building the future together. None of this would have happened if he had not picked a flower from his ship's garden and made the wrong gesture at exactly the right time. The universe, Jake had learned, had a strange sense of humor. And sometimes, just sometimes, its jokes turned out better than anyone's carefully made plans. Outside the ship, the stars shone on the growing fleet that carried the hopes and dreams of two species toward a future they would build together, one discovery at a time.